Welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Lore. I am Austin, your co-host for today's adventure.
And I'm Abby. We are so glad you're here.
So today in Middle-earth, we will learn about the creation of the Silmarils, that is the name of the book, and the darkening of Valinor. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh no. Over in Westeros, we are going to look back at how the Andals arrived in Westeros, and then we're going to dive into the religion that they brought with them, which is called the Faith of the Seven.
So, grab a flagon of ale and let's go on an adventure. Welcome back to Middle-earth, my fellow wanderers. This week, we are moving on to chapters 7 and 8 of the Silmarillion. So chapter 7 is called Of the Silmarils and the Unrest of the Noldor. So, little quick recap from last week, just to kind of catch everybody up. If you didn't watch last week's episode, please go back and check it out. It's a really nice setup to what's about to happen here, and it's all gas, no brakes now. We have kind of hit the end of the exposition. We are now full steam ahead on the story. So, quick recap. The elves finally left Middle-earth from the shores of Beleriand, and we are introduced to one of the most pivotal characters of the early story of the Silmarillion, Fëanor. So, quick recap. His mom, Muriel, hints that he is born with a fire of all of her possible heirs in one. And after Fëanor's birth, she became sick, and Fëanor's father, Finwë, kind of sends her off to Lorien, and unfortunately in Lorien she passes away. It's very unfortunate, and the father was upset. I'm putting air quotes for you podcast listeners because I'm still skeptical if he actually was sad. Anyways, he remarries, and that does not sit well with Fëanor, and it actually causes a rift between the two. And during this time, Melkor is actually being held captive by the Valar. They said they held him for about 3 ages. No one knows how long that is, but it's a long time. And they eventually release him, and he is allowed to wander the valleys of Valinor. And during this time, he helps, again, air quotes are happening, he helps the Valar and the elves kind of discover many great things and new gems and metals and all that jazz. But what he's really doing is he's beginning to incite unrest with the elves against the Valinor, or against the Valar.
He's good at Discord.
He loves that Discord, not the computer app, like legit Discord. So he claims that Fëanor, who at this point has helped them discover writing, discover telescopes, a ton of other inventions. He claims that Fëanor learned everything from him, and that kind of cites some unrest in the Noldor, which is where Fëanor is from. He's one of the Noldor elves. It incites some unrest among them. They kind of question if Fëanor is really a true leader or not. But it is not, I would like to state it is not true. Fëanor is just a guy with great ambition, and he learned everything himself. But the elves, the Noldor elves, just keep falling for it. I don't know why. So we're caught up now, and now we kind of dive full in to chapter 7. So the chapter opens with, he just goes straight in. This is the creation of the most pivotal objects in the whole book, the Silmarils.
The Silmarils.
It's almost like the book is called.
It's named after those.
Yes. So
very important.
Just a skosh, just a bit.
Okay.
So the way he describes these, Tolkien says they're the most renowned of all the works of the elves. So I think that is for all time. And in a future episode, obviously the One Ring was a very big creation. I am going to do a little compare and contrast episode here coming up between the Silmarils and the Ring. The Silmarils blow the One Ring out of the water in terms of their power. So you'll see more of what they do as we go along in the book, but keep an eye out for that episode. Okay. So Fëanor wanted to capture the light of the trees, the two great trees of Valinor, Teleprion and Lorleon. Tolkien likes to see me fumble my words, I swear to God.
He does.
Teleprion and Lorelin. I think I nailed it. So he wanted to capture the greatness of those trees and the glory of the Blessed Realm, a.k.a. Aman, Valinor, whatever you want to call it. So Fëanor began creating these Silmarils in secret. where Tolkien says he summoned all of his lore, power, and skill. He said lore.
We love lore.
We love lore. I had to include that because I was like, oh my god, he said lore.
If you're a podcaster, we did snaps for lore.
Snap laws. Snap laws. So when he was done, he created 3 Silmarils in total, and they took the form of jewels. So, not rings this time. They are pure jewels. And Tolkien has a very wordy and long-winded way of saying we will never know how or what these things are made of. So his exact words are, "Not until the sun passes and the moon falls shall it be known of what substance they were made."
Okay.
AKA,
So he just didn't decide.
basically, it's what I gathered, is that he was like, I don't know if I feel like explaining how these things are so powerful.
But this a little bit reminds me, we're nowhere near covering it. I'm nowhere near covering it on the podcast, but it a little bit reminds me of that phrase that Daenerys says about, oh my gosh, why am I forgetting his name? The Dothraki guy that she was married to when he died.
Oh,
like,
I just say Jason Momoa, but
yeah, him. I don't know why I'm.
What is his name?
Oh my god, it's because I'm on the spot. But
Yep.
Anyway, she says like she'll be reunited with him when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east and like all that type of stuff. That kind of reminds me of that little phrase.
Yeah, I agree. I was gonna look it up, but my phone's not connecting to the Wi-Fi. So, anyways, yeah, Jason Momoa.
Khal Drogo, got it.
Let's go.
Drogo, got it.
Wow, that was impressive. We don't need no technology.
Nope.
So yes, very similar. And so Tolkien actually goes on and he says they are actually living things, which is
Oh,
a little confusing.
that is.
He doesn't really expand, but what he does say is, so he describes them as living things who rejoiced in the light and received it and gave it back in hues more marvelous than before. Do with that information what you will. I'm just thinking he's trying to say they're beautiful.
Right.
And I don't know if because they are so powerful, like it's one of those things that the inanimate object is so powerful it gets sentience. I don't know, because that's
Right.
really all he says about it. So
Well, and but the way they're cut anyway, especially diamonds, like do reflect actual light, like sunlight. So maybe
do.
he's like saying, "This is they do that because they're jewels, but they also reflect like goodness." Maybe.
I think I like that because I have no better explanation, so I'm in. And then all the Valar and elves were filled with awe looking at them, and Mandos even foretold that the fate of Arda lay locked within them.
Oh.
Foreshadowing.
That is, yeah.
Mandos, we got a lot more on Mandos here coming up. He really gets a big role here in this part of the book. He is one of the Valar, and you will see his role here coming up shortly.
And he's not the Mandalorian.
He is not, but he could be the OG.
He could.
He does not have a Grogu, though. So
Oh, dang. You got to have a Grogu.
you got to have a Grogu. So Melkor, now that he is out and wandering, because we still don't know why on Earth they would have let him do that, but they did. Melkor sees the Silmarils and wants them for his own. The very memory of their radiance was a gnawing fire in his heart, says Tolkien. Yes. So it's funny because when you read these chapters, my brain's always in the gutter. And the amount of times that Tolkien says lust, I'm like, why do you use that word for it? Because I feel like that's more, a little more sexual. But I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's modern English, and back then it was more like coveting an object.
Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he really did say that Melkor lusted for these stones, even though we don't really know what they are. So from here on, Melkor plans to destroy Fëanor and break the alliance of Valar and the elves. So he begins to kind of spread whispers and rumors amongst the Noldor, kind of deceiving them into thinking that Fëanor made these out of treachery. And he even goes on to say, bitterly did the Noldor atone for the folly of their open ears in the days that followed after. Which is a long-winded way of saying the Noldor, they liked the tea a little too much. They listened to that gospel a little too much. They got a little too involved with it. And
Okay. I see.
yes,
Okay.
he's just basically trying to say that the Noldor's ears were a little too open to
Got
Melkor. And you'll see a lot more of that coming up.
They were like susceptible to like propaganda.
Yes,
Okay.
they really, again, they got into the drama on the tea, and they really could not let go of it. So then he tells the Noldor that the Valar actually, again, this is him trying to sow more discord between the Noldor and the Valar. He tells the Noldor that the Valar actually brought them to Aman out of jealousy, that because they were discovering that Eru Iluvatar, God, loved the elves more than the Valar. And to make it even worse, because Melkor is so good at sowing this discord, the Valar done messed up because, one, they were keeping a secret from the elves. Two, for some reason, they told that secret to Melkor. I don't understand. So the Valar have kept the secret that mortal men are actually going to be coming soon, and which shouldn't be a big deal. But what Melkor does is he twists this and kind of tells the Noldor elves that the men are actually coming to replace the elves, because Eru is so disappointed that, and the Valar are so disappointed in the elves that they want to banish them and replace them with men who they think would be better followers.
Okay.
So why the Valar didn't just tell the elves that they're coming, I don't know. It was completely on Manwë, who was the head Valar, and he just didn't tell them.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know either.
The book doesn't say why. I think it's more so hinted that Manwë just kind of figured it would be fine. Because again, like I kind of said last week, the theme of the Valar is that they still don't really know what evil and deception and all lies are. They're just such pure beings that they don't think ahead as to like, oh, this could be a problematic thing.
Okay.
So I think it's just because they're so pure. They don't
like naive, maybe.
Naivete, yes.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of the main reason they didn't tell them. But I'm like, if you guys are all powerful and all knowing, you should probably just be honest with your fellow elves. But what do I know?
Right.
So obviously, the Noldor don't like that when they start hearing that, and they actually begin to distrust the Valar, and they yearn for freedom. So while all this discord is going on, we get a little more insight into Fëanor here, and he's liking those Silmarils a little too much. He's kind of a little obsessed.
So now we have two people obsessed.
Yes. Fëanor, the creator, is obsessed with them, and now Melkor is filled with jealousy and wants them, is obsessed with getting them because they are so powerful.
Okay.
And during this time, while Fëanor's kind of losing his mind a little bit, the whispers start to get back to him that were started by Melkor, that Fingolfin, his stepbrother, that's
Okay. Yeah.
Finwë remarried and had Fingolfin.
Yep.
Rumors reached his ear that Fingolfin wanted to usurp Fëanor and take the Silmarils for himself, which is obviously it's fake.
Okay.
That's not true. That's just one of Melkor's discords. But now you're starting to see how good this guy is at trying to pluck these two or three factions apart, really. So as the rumors and lies of Melkor begin to spread, he is actually instructing the Noldor to start making weapons, which is a little problematic.
Super problematic.
So I think we can sense a little bit of civil war coming with the elves and the Valar. So Melkor he's gaming his game right now. He's on his A game, and it's a little bit the Valar's fault for not telling the elves about the men, and it's also a little bit of Fëanor's fault for dude's a little too lusty for those stones, Abby. I'm telling you. So
no thanks.
I know. So now, after some more time goes by, Fëanor and Fingolfin actually have a pretty big showdown in front of Finwë, their father. So these two are half brothers. Fingolfin, who is, in my opinion, in the way I read this story, is that he's pretty genuine. That he goes to Finwë to kind of just tell their father that, like, hey, I'm a little worried about Fëanor. Like, I think he's kind of a little off his rocker. So he asks Finwë to take some power away from Fëanor, and during this conversation, Fëanor actually strides in, draws his sword, and points it to the chest of his half-brother. So it's a
bold move.
It's a big no-no in the land of peace, obviously. So he even makes some comment about how the sharpness of his blade is even sharper than the words against him, or something like that. And it's just like, this guy's a little angry. So he also makes Fëanor also makes a mention that the Valar a little bit are at fault here for letting Melkor free, which is, You don't talk about the Valar's faults. You just don't do that. They don't like that. So this all happens in the middle of a square of Mindon, one of their bigger cities down there, near the Lonely Island. So the Valar, now it is apparent as day that corruption is beginning, and they're obviously a little worried about it. So at this time, the Valar decide to summon Fëanor before them at the Ring of Doom.
What is that?
That's not ominous at all.
No.
And this is the only time that this is mentioned, but it sounds cool. So I did a little research with my, if you were on video, you can see that I have the Silmarillion, gifted to me by Abby. I also have the Tolkien Companion, gifted to me by Abby, and I have the Nature of Middle-earth gifted to me by Brent. So I've got all the...
You're researched up.
I've got my receipts.
Yeah.
The Ring of Doom is basically described as where all of the Valar on Arda meet and have a council. The actual location doesn't have much description besides the giant fire being in the middle. I think it's more meant as a place of intimidation because it's obviously where you go to be punished.
Okay.
So
it's like court?
Yes, it's just a court. So it's just like they're basically, Mandos is in the middle because he is the Valar of judgment, and he will, he passes judgment on to whoever is brought to the court. But they all kind of sit in a half circle around the fire, and you're kind of sitting there like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, okay.
Type thing. So Ring of Doom sounds bad, and it's like, why is there doom in the land of beauty and all that stuff? It's, I don't know. I think it's just for a little bit of fear tactics. But anyways, Fëanor standing there against all the Valar. They are telling him that they are upset for bringing the sword up against his brother and for speaking ill will against the Valar. So Fëanor does kind of try to defend himself here. I won't get into the long-winded words that were used in this chapter. But basically, he's just like, sorry, like I think these Silmarils were getting to me a little bit, but also Melkor, that bad guy you let go, he's kind of up to no good. And they're like, oh, really? We didn't know. Like, they knew. So the Valar, mainly Mandos, who is the Valar of Judgment, decides to banish Fëanor for 12 years so he can go reflect on his decisions.
Oh, and not the stone reflect, like...
mental reflection.
Okay.
Yes.
Not like take your stones and go reflect the light.
But they did say, or, I think reflect was used specifically because of that reason you just said.
I got it. Okay.
So Fëanor, his 7 sons, and his father Finwë, who begrudgingly decides to go, but he says he goes because he loves his son so much. They all go north and they form a new city called Formenos, where he hoards gems and weapons, and he kept the Silmarils locked in a chamber of iron. So I think this is Austin's... my own thoughts on this is a bad idea. Let's send the guy who's going crazy about his creation to go sit and do nothing but look at his creation. Bold choice by the Valar. I mean, 12 years for them isn't very long.
Yeah.
So Fëanor's obviously a little upset at the decision, but he's like, okay, it's a little stint, whatever. We'll just go build the city, and me and my pops and my kids will reign supreme up here, and I'll just hoard all these gems and totally lose my mind a little bit. So
does he actually keep him locked up for all 12 years?
He does.
Okay.
So I think it's never outright mentioned in the book, but he's the only one who has access to that vault. So I assume he would still go down there and do the whole Gollum thing with them. But he is the only one who has access to them, and that is important to know going forward. So now that Melkor's been outed again, he goes into hiding, and Tulkas and a couple of the other Valar go on this huge search for him. They don't find him. It's mentioned that Melkor has some shape-shifting abilities, which I'll get into a little bit later. So it's very tough to find him. But where he first reappears is actually at the gates of Formenos, asking for counsel with Fëanor. Bold move. Melkor's a very bold guy.
Yeah, he is.
So he has devised this plan that he wants to befriend Fëanor, ultimately to try to get to the Silmarils. So he mentions that he mentions to Fëanor that he was like, hey, I was right. I told you the Valar were gonna they were gonna betray you, they were gonna banish you, and during this time, Fëanor is like, you can, based on Tolkien's writing, you can see Fëanor's like, okay, like maybe he is right. Maybe the Valar are flawed, and like this isn't the way we shouldn't follow them. But then Melkor gets a little too zealous, and he mentions that the Valar might be going after the Silmarils, and for some reason this clicks with Fëanor, and it is said that a fire lights within him, and he says, "Get thee gone from my gate, thou jail crow of Mendos." I said for instead of but sick line. I love the jail crow of Mandos. I was like, dang.
Get thee gone from.
Yeah, isn't that a great line?
I'm gonna use that on my.
Get thee gone
on my children.
It's perfect. I like that he calls Melkor a jail crow.
A jail crow.
Yeah, that's tough. So Melkor lays in shame. He at this time, Tolkien even says he goes into like a little depression because he doesn't know. I know we have a sad Melkor.
I don't feel bad.
I don't, but he's sad. He doesn't really know what his next move is. He's kind of lost at this point, so he kind of just goes into hiding again. A Roman Tulkas search everywhere for him, and they cannot find him. So they just kind of determine, he probably went back to Middle Earth. So they were like, okay, good riddance. Like, he's gone. Now we can kind of have peace. And during this time, peace kind of reigns in Aman once again for a time. But the last line of the chapter, Tolkien mentions that the Valar can feel that something bigger and more evil is coming.
Oh, no.
So we're peaceful again, but Fëanor's kind of stewing up there in the north, and he's not super happy. Melkor's nowhere to be found, and the Noldor aren't so happy because they're jibber jabbering too much. So it's peaceful, but it's kind of a ticking time bomb.
Yeah,
is what it really feels like. So that's chapter 7.
Okay.
And now we get to chapter 8. Which is a pretty sad chapter name. It is called "Of the Darkening of Valinor." So that's obviously not good.
Yep.
so right away, Tolkien talks about how Aroman Tulkas go to the north of Middle Earth looking for Melkor. I assume they were probably just checking out his old castle, the Tumno that was up there. That's the castle that, when all the elves were coming west, they were trying to avoid, and that's Tumno. Is the reason it's so cold up there, because that's where Melkor's power is.
Okay.
So I was talking about how the water's been frozen over and all that. It's coming from a tomb now.
Is that Galadriel goes there?
Yes.
In the very first episode of season 1, right?
She sure does.
Okay.
So you actually see it in the show. So they both go there. They can't find him. So the Valar just kind of decide to double their guard along all the coast of Aman. And they do mention, this is again where they mention that Melkor can shapeshift. But then Tolkien goes on to say he will lose this power soon. Foreshadowing again.
Okay.
So Melkor, now we get a kind of a POV section of him. He is actually in the desolate part of Aman called Avathar. So kind of like I said last week, Aman and Middle Earth, if you look at them from a wide zoom, they're both kind of crescent shaped and they kind of meet at a point. Mm-hmm. So Aman, on the southern kind of part of the crescent, is Avathar. It's kind of just described as big desert, sand dunes, all that jazz. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of life, dead trees, all that jazz. So I think that's kind of why they didn't go down there, is because they just figured Melkor can't live down there, but he can.
But it's still part of Valinor.
Yes. So Aman is the whole crescent. Valinor is kind of the middle to north section of Aman. Okay. And that's the Undying Lands. That's where everything's pretty, everything's perfect, blah, blah, blah. And then, Avathar is this southern part of Aman where it's kind of desolate. There's not much life, not a lot to do. So here, Melkor seeks out Ungoliant, which is, for you Tolkien nerds, this is a big name. So Tolkien goes on to mention that the Valar do not know where Ungoliant came from.
Okay.
It's kind of theorized that she was one of Melkor's first servants that he corrupted, but she actually turned away because she wanted to sow her own discord. He says it again here. She had her own thoughts of how to spread her evil and her darkness, and she truly is the Queen of Darkness that you'll see here in a second. So So she takes the form of a great spider. I think if you guys, for you casual Lord of the Rings fans, you obviously know Shelob from the third movie. Shelob is a descendant of Ungoliant.
Okay, I wondered.
Yes, I actually think a daughter. I actually think they're directly
Okay.
related.
Got it. So they live a long time.
They do. Ungoliant is way bigger than Shelob is. I mean, she's giant. I'll get into here in a second. But Ungoliant's true power is ultimate darkness, and I think Tolkien actually uses the word, her power is called unlight. So what she does is she takes in light and then she spins it back out as dark webs. And those dark webs are an all-encompassing darkness that when you look into it, it looks like an endless void. Like that's how dark it is. So have you seen that like paint that's like true black almost, where it looks like it literally looks like a hole if you look into it?
Yeah.
That's how I think of her webs, is that they're that dark and it looks.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's not good. So Melkor also, now that he's met Ungoliant, goes back to his original form, his true form as a Dark Lord. And Tolkien's only description of this form is, quote, tall and terrible. So I kind of just imagine it. I think Rings of Power did a really good job of showing Sauron's true form. You know, he's really tall. He's got the spiky crown. I think Melkor is similar, but I think even bigger, because they always mention how, yes, Sauron is tall, but Melkor is always even bigger compared to him. So I'm picturing like a 10-foot tall, big, clad in black armor type guy. So now he's scary. And he will remain in this form forever after. So he was, when he was with the elves, just a refrain, I think I said this last episode, he took a fair form. He looked like an elf.
Like an elf.
Like a normal Valar. But that was not his true form. He is a shapeshifter and he can switch between, but this Dark Lord form is his true form. So now, like I said before, Ungoliant has the power of unlight, so she hides their passage north towards the Valar. So the two they talk, they're like, Melkor's like, hey, I know we had our differences in the past, but if you help me, you can have whatever you want. And Tolkien kind of gives a hint here of like, Melkor doesn't really mean that, so that you'll see in the future what that really means.
Okay.
But Melkor is kind of working his own servants at this point too, where he can't even trust him with his own people. So, while Melkor and Ungoliant are powwowing, the Valar and the elves decide to throw a great festival. These guys are just
knock it off with the.
They love their festivals.
Nothing
man.
good happens.
Never ever. So they're throwing this in honor of Eru, and they're actually throwing it in honor of the dismissal of Melkor. Funny enough.
Well,
Yep.
okay.
So all the elves and the Valar come to the feast. Even the begrudgingly angry Noldor show up, and even Fëanor himself shows up.
Okay. He was invited.
He was.
All right.
The Valar and the other elves kind of want to show goodwill towards Fëanor, but Fëanor still is a little upset. So he says yes, but he comes. He makes a statement. He shows not dressed up at all. Like I see it as this is a formal ball, and he shows up in his pajamas. That's what I think. That's the way I equate it, because Tolkien talks about he didn't wear any gems, he didn't wear the Silmarils, he didn't wear anything. He just wore a green robe, and that was it.
Okay.
And it took everybody by surprise, and everybody was kind of upset because the power and the light of the Silmarils is now, I would say, infecting. It's not that bad, but everybody's just enthralled by them. So I think the main reason they invited him is they wanted to see the Silmarils again.
Okay.
But he is making a statement saying, I'm not bringing them. Like, you guys banished me, you don't get to see them, they're mine. So at this feast, Fëanor and Fingolfin actually find each other, and Tolkien's kind of building it up like they're going to get in this big tussle, but they actually kind of kibosh it, and they put it to rest. They even shake hands, and Fingolfin's like, I'm with you, brother. Like, I will follow you to the ends of the earth. And Fëanor stays quiet for a while, but he ultimately says, I'm with you too, brother. And they kind of make up. And Tolkien again hints here that this is big for the rest of the story that these two have made up.
Okay.
So it's really funny because the way that they literally, the sentence goes from them shaking hands and making up, and as soon as they kind of meet hands and shake, Melkor and Ungoliant sneak up to the two great trees. So Melkor thrusts his great spear into the trees, and their sap bursts forth as if it was their own blood. And Ungoliant soaks up all of the sap, and then she even sinks her fangs in the tree to spread her darkness, and then she even drinks the wells of Varda dry, turning her into an even more monstrous form that scares Melkor.
Oh, okay. So wait, pause. Sorry, just because some of this is new for me. So but the trees are over in Arda, right?
No, they are on Aman.
Okay.
So they're in the heart of Valinor.
Okay.
So you got the crescent, you got the lonely island who's kind of sitting here.
Yep.
You go straight across and you'll hit to kind of where they're having this party and where the two great trees are.
Okay, got it. So, my bad.
You're good. That's good clarification for the audience too. So yeah, not good, because to remind everyone, these trees were providing the light. There is no sun at this point. The trees were providing the light for the land. They were providing the light for even Middle Earth at this point. So as soon as these trees are hit by Melkor and Ungoliant, everything goes dark. The great, and this is what Tolkien says, the great darkness of Valinor begins. So all light and song fades from Valinor, and that was a big thing, is that they're always harmonizing and making music.
Yeah.
As soon as this happens, it just goes dead quiet, which I think would be really cool if it was ever put into a movie. The music of the Ainur is heard no more, and not even the Valar's gaze can pierce this darkness, because, like I said, Ungoliant bit into the trees and spread her darkness, and that darkness is so devoid of light you can't even see, like 1 inch in front of you. So Ungoliant and Melkor, after ruining the trees, run away, and none of them were able to catch them because just the darkness it's an endless void. And Tolkien even hints that the darkness is so deep and powerful that it even has the power to bring terror to the hearts of those lesser than the Valar. So I think what he's saying here is that the darkness is so scary that all the elves are, one, not only fearful, but I think start to be corrupted a little bit. I think that's how bad it is. So Manwë, Tolkis, and Arome all try to find the two Dark Lords, but to no avail. And they have escaped, and their treachery has been set, says Tolkien. The last tidbit I want to throw in from this chapter is it did mention that Ungoliant and Melkor went north, and if you know what is in the north, it is Feanor's Silmarils. So I think it's insinuated that they are going to head up north, and they're going to try to make a play for the Silmarils in the complete darkness. Right. So that's chapter 8.
Dang.
It is. We are going now.
Yeah, it's a tough way to end, though.
I know. And so this next chapter really gets into the Noldor and the Valar are just not happy with each other, and it kind of gets into what happens there. I won't spoil it, but next week's a pretty long chapter, so I will warn you, fans. Hopefully you like me talking, because it will be a longer episode from me. But yeah, I told you, we're all gas, no brakes now. So I think this is where the story really starts to become fun and engaging, and you start to see how bad Melkor really is, and now that he's got all this power,
right? Just
you wait, he's even worse. So that's it.
All right, well,
we did it.
We did it.
Yes, and now we transition from Middle Earth to the lands of Essos. If I am wrong,
No, you're not. You are correct. So welcome to the Game of Thrones portion of the episode. And normally I say welcome to Westeros, but this week we are actually leaving Westeros for the first half of our lore.
Ding, 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 ding.
I was like, how have we not said that on the podcast?
I don't know. Yeah,
but we're going to say it now. Anytime
now we know.
We're going to explore lore.
Explore the lore.
Explore the
lore.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What are we doing? Sitting on a gold mine.
We have been. So yeah, strap in. We're headed to Essos, and if you know anything about the Game of Thrones universe, Essos is it's bigger than Westeros by a lot. It's a little more wild. There's a lot more crazy stuff that kind of goes down over there. There's all kinds of very, very ancient civilizations over there. Whereas in Westeros, that it really is all just goes back to the first men, but even the first men came from Essos. So a lot more history over there. It's not my absolute favorite place in this universe to talk about, but it is important when it comes to talking about the Andals. So the Andals themselves, they are an ancient people. They resided in Essos for thousands of years before they ever thought to attempt traveling across the narrow sea to Westeros. And they, much like most of these groups of people we've talked about so far, they were originally a migratory people, but they stuck to a general area known as the Axe. And if we're for sure going to share out a map just so you guys know where I'm talking about, because I don't, as much as I could probably tell you the Westerosi map, like in my sleep, that's as little as I know the Essos map. But if you do know the Essos map, we're kind of up near Bravos, kind of in between Pentos and Bravos. Bravos is way in the north, Pentos is kind of in the middle, and we're in between the two.
Okay.
So anyway, back to the Axe. It sits on the eastern side of the upper Rhoyne River, and the Rhoyne River is a huge river, and it also is kind of like the Nile, I think, because I could be wrong, but I believe it flows south to north like
yes.
the Nile does. And there's so many old civilizations built up around the Rhoyne River, just like how there was a lot of civilizations built around the Nile. So I think that's kind of the idea here. But we're way up at the top of the Rhoyne River, the upper part. And when they eventually started to settle down and build an actual realm, they claimed the inner heartland by the river all the way to the coasts of the Shivering Sea to the north and the Narrow Sea to the west. And
That's pretty big.
it's big. Well, when you see the rest of Essos, it doesn't look that big.
Oh,
but
this
it's,
is that big?
yeah, but it's
my.
probably as big as one of the seven kingdoms, except for the north. It's
I
probably
should
not
know
as big.
this because we have Game of Thrones Risk, of course.
We do.
Essos
That's
is
true.
big. I do remember now.
So anyway, it's big, but not. I would compare it to maybe the Vale, or
Okay.
maybe a little bit bigger than the Vale. But they named their new kingdom Andalos. Super clever.
Wow,
They're-
real original.
But there are two really big deals about the Andals, and that's why we're going to talk about them. One, the biggest thing is that they follow the faith of the seven, and there's going to be a ton more on that later. I will give you all the tea on the faith of the seven. Two is that the Andals know how to forge iron, and most other people in Essos at this point in time don't know how to do that. So
They're kind of in a stone age, but they're moving up the ladder of technology here.
skipping ahead skipped the Bronze Age, went straight to iron. So according to themselves, they learned how to forge iron from their gods, the seven gods. That's a fun little story they tell themselves. One of the seven gods, which we'll get into more detail on later, is called the Smith. So obviously
Fitting.
he knows how to work with iron. They believe the Smith himself taught the ancient Andals all of his knowledge, and they still practice it today. And actually, they believe all seven of their gods at one point in ancient history kind of walked among them and kind of took a human form. I doubt it. Doubt that very much.
This sounds like some what's that word? Some legends. I could not
Legends.
think of that word. I don't know why.
Yes.
Some legends have been passed down that have taken a bit of an extreme of their own.
Right. So, what is much more likely due to the inhabiting of them, the Andals are inhabiting the lands of the Upper Rhoyne. Along the Rhoyne River, the whole river, is these people called the Rhoynar.
Wow.
Fancy.
They're really getting
Yes,
creative with these names.
they are. And they probably, most likely, to survive, traded and dealt with, communicated with, maybe co-opted with, maybe went to war with these people called the Rhoynar. And the Rhoynar were already an advanced civilization by the time the Andals even decided to make a kingdom. So it's much, much more likely that they learned how to work iron from the Rhoynar. And it is a known fact that even the Valyrians learned how to work with iron from the Rhoynar. But eventually, the Valyrians the students far surpassed the teacher on that one, because we all know about Valyrian steel.
They got their own steel.
Yes, all that type of stuff.
They're bougie.
So in conclusion, the Andals probably learned all their ironwork techniques from the Rhoynar, but then used that to their advantage when they were carving out a kingdom for themselves, because it was super easy to conquer the little tribes that were there who were using crude, like, naturalistic weapons of, like, bones and teeth and stuff like that. So, yeah. So now we've got our kingdom. We've got Andalos, and they stay there for a long time, like thousands of years. They grow in number greatly, and supposedly the 7 gods of the faith of the 7, those 7 gods crowned a man named Hugor of the Hill, and they promised him and his descendants, this is in air quotes, they promised him great kingdoms in a foreign land.
Huh. I assume that means Westeros.
Right. And this is exactly what modern day septas, which are kind of like nuns, and septons, which are kind of like priests, that's what they teach young children as the reason that the Andals set out for Westeros in the first place.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
However,
there is a however.
There is a however, comma. The maesters at the Citadel, we know them. We know they seem kind of religious, but they're actually more scientists and historians more so than religious leaders. They work closely with the religious leaders, but they're not affiliated with a religion. So anyway, the maesters at the Citadel, they think they have found a different reason, maybe the more correct reason, that Andals headed out for Westeros. So strap in, because there's a lot of history and lore here that I'm not going to go into, because if I did, we'd be here for 4 hours. And I'm going to save most of it for a different episode, maybe even a different season. I don't know how long it's going to take me to dive in on the Valyrians, but
oh boy,
because it involves the Valyrians. So anyway, here we go. In other areas of Essos, not Andalos, but lots of other areas in Essos, major changes were happening politically and kingdom-wise, ruling family-wise, all kinds of things. There used to be this big empire called Old Geese, like G-H-I-S.
The old geezer?
Not the geese like this, but so not a goose, but
geese.
And
yes,
it gets mentioned. This empire gets mentioned a little bit in modern Game of Thrones. I don't remember why. It gets mentioned more so in Fire and Blood, but anyway, I'm not going to go into Old Geese because
that's a whole rabbit hole, I'm sure.
Yes, but it fell. This old empire fell. It had been in place since the Dawn Age. So it fell.
There's a void.
There's a void, and the Valyrians went to town on colonization, imperialism, all kinds of maybe not so good things.
Uh-oh.
That, things like slavery that are frowned upon by most gods and religions. Yes, so the Valyrians kind of filled that void with their own imperialism. If you look at the map, Valyria is much further south in Essos compared to Andalos, where we are, and they kind of used the Rhoyne River to travel.
Because they can go from south to north.
And so it took them a while. They ran into the Rhoynar first, that group of people first, and they put up a pretty stinking good fight. But eventually it was...
they're going to war over this thing.
Yeah, they want control of Essos, the whole kit and caboodle. So they do eventually defeat the Rhoynar. That takes thousands of years. That's what I'm talking about.
Jeez!
Or maybe not thousands. I could be wrong.
Still,
it could be like 500, but
it's still a long time.
It's a long time, so that's why I'm not going to go into all the details on that. But they do eventually get to Andalos, and they start to fight the Andals. And it's thought that the Andals just keep retreating further and further, like northeast, till they get to the Shivering Sea or maybe the Narrow Sea. And pretty much their only other option besides being sold into slavery is to sail across the Narrow Sea. And some of the Andals did actually stay and try to fight the Valyrians off and probably were sold into slavery. But many of them very quickly built a bunch of ships and set sail. So that's how it probably happened.
It's funny because you feel like in, again, more I'm a more casual fan of Game of Thrones. I think they always talk about how the Valyrians were like the epitome of man on Earth, and like they were this great kingdom, but like kind of sounds like they were kind of the worst a little bit.
They were messing with stuff they probably shouldn't have been messing with.
Ruh-roh.
I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Super technologically advanced and very smart. Obviously, they could wield a lot of power over political power, but also like magical power. And they had dragon riders and all kinds of things, and so a lot of cool stuff, but they were meddling in some stuff they shouldn't have meddled.
Not great.
Yeah. So the Andals, their biggest sticking point with the Valyrians was that they, even if they weren't sold into slavery, if they were just gonna say like, okay, we'll follow your way of life, just don't sell us into slavery, the Valyrians were not going to let them continue practicing the faith of the Seven, and they really held tight to that faith. They were dedicated. So in Westeros, they knew they would have religious freedom.
Wow, it sounds similar to America.
Sure does, doesn't it?
Wow, okay.
And it's actually going to sound, you'll see when we get to the faith, you'll see where my thoughts go.
Was there a character named Christopher Columbus?
There was no Columbus.
I was trying to think of a Game of Thrones version of that name, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it does sort of sound like a little bit like the Protestant Reformation, I think. It also, but you'll get
There's a couple of mixes of different historical
events.
Motivations, I think. I can tell here, yeah.
Yeah. So they set sail. They arrive on the Fingers in the Vale, and that is where we're going next episode. In episode 6, we're going to do a big history adventure on the Vale and House Arryn, who rules the Vale. So they prompt this. I just think this is funny, and I guess it's good because like this is how we know that this is where they landed. But I guess they landed, they hop out of their boats and promptly start carving the 7-pointed star on like any rock imaginable, just everywhere. So
wow,
you can like still see them today if you go there. You can.
They just went to town.
Like 7.
We want them.
So
we still got you 7.
Yes, but yeah, that's where they landed. At this point, the first men are still stuck in the Bronze Age. They have some advanced tools, especially compared to the Children of the Forest, but we're not at iron yet. But the Andals brought that iron with them, and they pretty easily defeated the first men at every turn in the Vale.
Nope.
In the Vale is the caveat there, but it still took them about 50 plus years to conquer the Vale. Like it was kind of more like a series of wars or battles. It was never really like, okay, one day we landed and a week later we control the Vale. It was not
that quick.
Not like that, no. And eventually, once it was pretty clear that the Vale was going to be controlled by these new people called the Andals, there were a few families of the first men that bent their knee to the Andals, and we'll talk about them next episode because we're going to do a deep dive on the Vale, like we said. But so yes, just keep that in mind. There's the people in the Vale do have some ties still to the first men, especially certain families. But the legends the Andal legends tell us there was this Andal hero named Sir Artus Arryn, who supposedly rode a falcon, which is actually kind of cool.
Whoa. That's a big falcon.
It must be. And defeated the reigning king in the Vale, who was of the first men, and henceforth founded and established House Arryn.
Well, there it is.
The truth is probably more so that when these certain families of the first men bent their knee to the Andals, but Arryn is an Andal name, just to be clear. Like they are Andal people, but they began intermarrying with some of the other houses, like House Royce, and who is a family of the first men, and this is what established the ruling House Arryn.
I assume it's more so that because it sounds like the Andals are very much they're a little zealous with their legend talk.
Yeah, they're real zealous. They love their version of history. They like to write.
They like to
own.
fantasize it. It sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. So they've now gotten control of the Vale. And we're now, just keep in mind, we're now like a couple generations in on this whole being in Westeros situation, so they're pretty comfy now. It's not like they don't really feel like they're in a new world so much anymore. They've been here close to 60 years now. And they go ahead and start forging into the other kingdoms in Westeros, and they mostly succeed in conquering these older realms of the First Men. They also, like the First Men before them, did not care for the children of the forest, but they succeeded much faster because of their iron weapons. They succeeded much faster in eradicating the children, which is really sad, I think. And just to reiterate, there are only two places in Westeros that the Andals couldn't conquer. One of them is the Isle of Faces.
We keep hearing about this place, huh?
Shocker.
Interesting.
It's never conquered.
Interesting.
But the rest of the southern kingdoms fell to the Andals one by one. The north is the only kingdom who steadfastly held them off.
King of the North.
That's right. That is correct. They did that two ways. One, they had a geological advantage because to get from anywhere in the south to the north, you have to go through the neck. It's a really skinny little piece of land, and it's very swampy. And remember, this is where the Crannog men live. Their castle is the one that floats on the water, and nobody really knows kind of where it is. So they had that to their advantage. And then just north of the neck is Moat Cailin, which is an ancient, very sturdy, very easy to defend keep. So if the Andals made it past the swamp, they didn't last long, because then they ran into the people that were holding Moat Cailin. And it is said that lots and lots and lots of Andal armies died in the neck.
Oof.
And eventually they were like, screw that, we're not doing that.
It's not
You
worth
guys can just have that. That's fine. So
I don't want to go take lands that are all winter all the time. Like, yeah, that's yours. Just have
yeah.
it.
So the kings of winter continued their rule independently of the other six kingdoms, who all the other six kingdoms are slowly kind of assimilating to the Andal way of life. So that brings us to the biggest part of that assimilation.
We're transitioning from old gods to the seven, I
To
assume.
the new. Yeah.
Out with the old.
That brings us to the faith of the seven. For starters, this religion is nothing like the old gods that we learned about in episode 1. This is a full-fledged religion. There's lots of rules. There's lots of history. Whether that history is true or just part of the religion, nobody really knows. They have a Bible, kind of, and they have practicing holy men and holy women.
We haven't even talked about it yet, but I still like the old gods better because that seemed
Correct.
more chill. They were
Yes.
just like, yeah, like we might have some magic, we might not, but just respect the earth and you're good.
Yes,
I like
correct.
that better.
I like it better. So, just to pause real quick for my own 2 cents. And this, just know that this is my own 2 cents. I have not looked at Reddit about any of this. I try to stay away from Reddit. I try to stick to the wiki and the book. But my own 2 cents is that the First Men kind of represent Vikings. Like they followed these old gods. They were very fierce fighters like Vikings. There was some good ones and some bad ones like Vikings, but their spirituality was very like rooted in nature. The Andals, this is now the Holy Roman Empire. Like
Yep. That's what I was getting to.
And I'm not talking about if you think, like, if you're one of those people that can't stop thinking about the Roman Empire. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about,
I
like,
am one of those, but
I'm talking about, like, Crusades. Like, this is when the Holy Roman Empire was formed. Like, that's kind of what's happening. Like, they came over here to Westeros, kind of like how they went up to England and started telling the people that were already in England, like, hey, no, you're going to be Catholic now.
yep. Too bad.
So that's kind of where, just to preface, that's where we're at, and let's dive in. You ready?
I already buckled in. I'm ready to go.
Okay. The faith of the seven. So who are these seven? Why do we have faith in them? They are called the seven who are one, which is confirmed by George. It's a direct call out to the Holy Trinity in Catholicism.
Makes sense.
George was raised Catholic, as were we.
Yep.
So we're leaning heavily.
We're at least he's transparent about it.
He is, yeah.
Tolkien was trying to be like, no, it's not, but like, come on, man, it is.
Yeah, and Tolkien was very devout Catholic, whereas George is very much like, I was raised that way and I ain't buying it anymore.
Yeah.
So there are 7 different aspects of one God who should be worshipped above all else in this faith. 3 of these are for sure derived from Catholicism, which we'll talk about in a minute. But 3 of them are also pagan goddesses, which I think is interesting that he threw that in there, maybe just as a slap in the face. I'm not sure.
It kind of feels like it.
Yeah, so that to me is interesting. But here we go. So the Father, he's obviously the Father.
Interesting.
He's one of the 7. He's all about justice and judgment. So people pray to him when they are seeking justice for something, or when they need some wisdom in coming to a judgment on something. And it's not unusual to hear the phrase, "May the Father judge you justly."
I'm getting flashbacks, it feels like, from my childhood.
Usually people say that when they think you're making a mistake or about to do something wrong, maybe. I don't know. So there's that little.
Is that kind of like a Southern, like, bless your heart type situation?
It's like a little Catholic guilt trip, I
Yeah.
think. The Mother, she's next. She is here for mercy and safety. So,
Sounds like Mary.
yep. People pray to her when they're feeling guilty, if they need someone to forgive them, and also when they're seeking shelter or protection. And people also give offerings to her, particularly when a woman becomes pregnant. They're hoping that the mother will help keep the pregnant woman and the baby safe.
Okay.
So there's the Mother. Self-explanatory. The Warrior.
Is it Tokus?
It could be Tulkas. I think of the warrior as like the Son of God, like Jesus, kind of. He's always depicted with a sword. He protects his followers of the faith from their enemies, aka other religions. People pray to him for courage and strength in battle, and to keep them safe during the same battle. So, "May the warrior defend you" is a phrase that is often put into battle cry, or like a speech before a battle, things like that. Or if somebody has to face a trial by combat.
Interesting.
And then the Smith, this kind of reminds me of the Holy Spirit a little bit, but the Smith is always depicted with a hammer. They mend all things that are broken, or not they, I meant he. He mends all things that are broken, and he can set the world right when things seem hopeless.
Interesting.
He is prayed to for strength, although not in the sense of battle, more in the sense of like an inner strength to like face a tough situation or something like that. The Maiden is next. She's depicted as a beautiful young woman who represents innocence. People pray to her to keep their young daughters safe and to help their daughters have the courage to hold on to their innocence.
Oh, sweet Lord.
Yep. And then a bride might light candles to the maid. I don't know. I think like in thanks, maybe, or I don't know. In gratitude, if she thinks that a good marital match has been made for her. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is the crone. She's an elderly woman. I think it's interesting. She's always depicted holding a raised lantern.
Oh.
And she's supposed to, people pray to her for wisdom and guidance.
Oh, okay. I thought she was going to be like bad, but she's
like,
just.
No, like enlightenment.
Yeah, she's like a guide. Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of like her the best. Is my kind
I
of.
just like the crown. I like
They
that.
have the name, the crown. And last but not least, the 7th god is the stranger. He or they are neither male nor female, but also both. So I'm going to use they, them pronouns. They are the outcast. They're a wanderer, and they're also called the face of death. Because it's thought that the stranger leads newly deceased people into the afterlife. But you can pray to the stranger if you're feeling like an outcast or feeling misunderstood. You can light a candle to the stranger. So he's here for the emo kids. That's what I just the
Yes, the emo kids of Westeros.
misunderstood.
The stranger gets me.
Yes, so there's the 7 gods. And then if you weren't familiar, Mother, Maiden, and Crone is known as like the triple goddess in paganism.
Yep.
So
I think there's definitely a little bit of a call out there.
yeah. And then, like we already said, the Father, Warrior, Smith is basically like God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, kind of. So, and then you threw the stranger in there too.
Yep.
But, all right, what do we do in this religion? How are we organized? There are priests that are both male and female, although they have very different roles. So it sounds like they're gender equal, but just wait.
Oh boy.
Septons are males. They're the ones that perform the religious service every Sunday. Their service is on the 7th day, which I take to be Sunday.
Yep.
They wear clothing pretty similar to that of a Catholic priest, but they wear this fun little, this is not in the show, so I think it's a fun little book addition, but Septons wear this little crystal around their neck because crystals like reflect light, we're doing a lot of stones this week.
Yes,
too.
we are. It is a stone week.
So in like rainbows have 7 colors and they are the faith of the 7, so they love rainbows. I think this is also kind of a George being, I don't know, although he wrote these in the 80s, so who knows, maybe rainbows back then wasn't gay pride, I don't know.
I think I'm going to go with that story that it is though.
Yeah, because these are supposed to be like Catholic priests, and they're wearing crystals to reflect a rainbow. They
like rainbows.
They also wear belts that are like the pattern of the belt is a rainbow.
Oh my God.
So yeah, Septons perform marriages, pray over the sick and dying, give spiritual guidance, hear confessions, and issue forgiveness.
So they're priests.
Right, basically. There's all your
That's
sacraments.
literally the exact same thing.
Those are your sacraments.
Yep.
Sorry, if you weren't raised Catholic, sorry. We could make Catholic jokes all day.
The whole time. I've been holding back.
So yeah, most Septons stay in one sept, which is like a church, for their entire life of service. But there is a group of them. I don't think they travel together, but there's like a certain number of them that travel around and kind of preach on the fly. And that's just so that the poor and migrant people of Westeros can receive services and sacraments and all the things. So
Makes sense.
yes. And now we get to septas, which are the females. They wear all white robes, but they also wear the fun little rainbow belts and a crystal around their neck. Their job is very different. They don't perform no sacraments. They are basically governesses to the noble families of Westeros. They're supposed to educate the children. They do teach like secular subjects like reading and writing and math, but they also teach the faith and piety, all the things to pray, that's what they teach.
Huh.
They spend a lot more time with the daughters than the sons, because then they also teach the daughters, they call it in air quotes the womanly arts things,
Oh boy, we're getting a little stereotypical.
yeah, things like needlework and weaving and things like that. The one gender equal thing about septas is they can also hear confessions.
Okay, all right.
So I guess there's that. Both septons and septas forsake their last names when they take their vows, so they cannot show any prior loyalty to their families.
There's no individualism. They're all one.
Right, yep. And there is a council of high-ranking septons known as the most devout, and those are capitalized. Their biggest responsibility is voting for the next high septon, who is the Pope.
Oh my God. It's just slapping me in the face.
There are this other group of holy women called the Silent Sisters, who are basically the morticians of Westeros. They prepare a dead body for the grave. It goes into all kinds of detail on how they do that. Basically, it's kind of like mummification a little bit, but also more so the way we do it now. I don't know. I didn't dive in on that because that's not my jam. But yes, they just know if somebody passes away, the person that's going to get them ready for the funeral and the burial and all that is the Silent Sisters.
Does not sound like a fun job.
Contrary to popular belief, they have not had their tongues cut out. They just take a vow of silence.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
Jeez.
And they are you can tell the difference between them and a septa because they dress all in gray, and they keep their face covered, everything except for their eyes, because it's said that it's kind of like bad luck to look on the face of death. Meaning, like, it's bad luck for the general population to look at a Silent Sister because she deals so closely with death, not meaning, like, she can't look at a dead person. That's not what they mean. Because I got confused for a second. I was like, wait, then why'd they leave their eyes uncovered if they're not?
Yeah.
Now I get it. And then there are also some people, like some holy brothers, holy sisters. There's a faith militant. That's for a whole separate episode.
They're in depth.
So there's a lot of going on.
See, hey, this is again why I'm with the old gods. There ain't this whole
right.
There's no foundation. There's no business type sort thing. It's just like, you go do you, you know? And I like that.
And so now let's talk about their practices. How do they worship? They have a service on the 7th day of the week in a sept. Septs of wealthier families have richly decorated altars to all 7 gods with lots of fancy stones and jewels, which I think is also poking at Catholicism because we're famous for our marble altars and everything.
It's got to look bougie.
Sure does. They have a book called The 7-Pointed Star, which is...
Wow.
But they love those 7-pointed stars.
They do. They really do. I mean, they carved them everywhere, apparently.
And it's basically the Bible. It lays out their version of history.
Air quotes.
Their holy days, there are some holy days, one for each god. So each god gets their own holy day. And then there's a super holy day on the 7th day of the 7th moon. So like July 7th, maybe?
Now, can we adopt this in real life so I can have 7 days off of work every year?
That would be lovely.
That'd be nice.
So then we arrive at their marriage rites, which are pretty cool. We do see quite a few marriages in the show that follow this structure, the way that the Faith of the Seven sets it up. So a marriage has to take place in a sept, and it has to be presided over by a septon. The bride wears a white or ivory dress, much like ourselves, but she gets this cloak put over her dress called the maiden cloak. And her maiden cloak is always made in the colors of her father's house.
That's rad.
And then her father escorts her to, or if her father is not alive anymore, like a male kinsman will escort her to the altar. They take 7 vows are made, 7 blessings are invoked, and 7 promises are exchanged.
They love 7. My God. Wait till they find out there's a movie called 7.
Right.
Oh, my God.
Oh, woof. And the septon even does the whole thing that we do in Catholic weddings where he does the whole speak now or forever hold your peace thing. I don't think he doesn't say it like that,
right.
But it's kind of like, does anyone challenge the union, blah, blah, blah.
Of these two, yeah. Yep.
And then if no one challenges, then her maiden cloak is removed by her new husband and exchanged for a cloak bearing his house colors.
This is really nice.
It's kind of a nice thing, although they say it's to show that she passes from her father's protection to her husband's protection, but it does toe the line of ownership. Too,
okay, now we've gotten a little gross.
Yeah, that's the one part I don't like about it.
I like just the depiction of your changing of families. But this is the ownership thing.
Or bringing together a family maybe is better. But yeah, there is always a huge feast party afterwards. We all know a good Catholic wedding comes with a good Catholic reception.
Gotta have it.
But then they do this thing called a bedding, which is it.
Oh no, I already know.
No, we're not. We're gonna skip over that.
Not today.
But it is important to note that a wedding that has not been consummated can be set aside or annulled as illegitimate by the High Septon or a council of faith.
My God.
So they do like to
How
make
do you know
sure.
that they didn't?
They like to make sure.
They check?
I don't know.
That's awful.
Yeah.
I was all in on these weddings, and then this happened. God.
Yep.
George, you just had to ruin it.
So, okay, we're going to switch gears. Stop talking about weddings. Now we're going to talk about the afterlife. It's not super descriptive. It's just said that their version of the afterlife includes 7 heavens and 7 hells.
Oh.
We do hear a lot of people in the show be say when they're mad or whatever, they'll be like, 7 hells.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically the same thing as Catholic heaven and hell, except that each one has 7 levels.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yes. So what is not allowed in this religion? What are they not supposed to be doing?
What are the big no-nos?
Prostitution. So
Okay.
no. Gambling. No. Don't do it.
You lose me on that one a little bit, but keep going.
Bastardy.
Yeah.
We can't be having children out of wedlock.
Agree.
Slavery and polygamy are called an abomination and monstrous.
Wait, what was bastardy?
Like having a child out of wedlock.
Oh. They're kind of sticklers, but let's keep going.
Right.
Slavery and polygamy.
I'm good with slavery and polygamy being
That one's fine.
Abomination
We
and
should leave
monstrous.
those in
That's
there.
fine. Incest is vile,
Yes.
but I have have an except if you're a Targaryen.
There it is.
They have their own, literally within the religion, the Targaryen family has their own doctrine. It's called the doctrine of exceptionalism,
Oh my lord.
which states that if you're a Targaryen, you can do the polygamy and the incest. That's fine. But if you're not a Targaryen, don't do it. Don't.
That I'm not gonna ask questions. That makes no sense. But
It has to do with Aegon's conquest, and we can get into it
Okay.
later. But yeah, he like sat down with some like the High Septon and some people and decided this. But yeah, now they have their own doctrine.
okay.
And last but not least, kinslaying.
Yeah. Yes.
Kinslaying is the most accursed sin.
Well, there's a lot of those.
But I do like that, just like the old gods, this is the one time they are like the old gods. They say the degree of kin and the reason for the slaying do play.
So they're saying like maybe it's okay, you know?
So
Maybe
you're
it's not
saying
that bad.
there's a chance.
Yeah, you're saying it's not that bad.
Yes. So, yeah, all in all, this is Westeros' version of Catholicism, and the way he plays on all things Catholic does kind of crack me up.
It does. It's really funny.
We were both raised Catholic like George. We've also both kind of leaned pretty heavily away from Catholicism in adulthood, so I like how he has represented it here.
Yep.
There's no proof anywhere in any that I have seen. If you want to call me out for being wrong, that's fine. But from what I've seen, there's no real proof that the seven gods actually hear anybody's prayers and answer them or have any real power. But their followers tend to be extremely devout and extremely convinced that they are powerful and real and things like that. And that just like screams medieval Catholicism to me.
Yep.
So, and then again, I think it's interesting that he borrowed Mother, Maiden, and Crone from paganism and threw that in there with all the Catholic stuff.
Totally did on purpose.
Yeah.
That was
and
cool.
I don't really know why he did that or if it was a coincidence, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the faith of the seven, y'all.
Dang. It was cool. I'm still an old gods guy myself,
Yeah,
but
always.
man, so I always thought I get why the Andals came here. I thought from my limited knowledge that the Andals were like not good people, and they did a lot of course they went to war with the First Men, and they probably a lot of bad things happened. But I always pictured the Andals being like kind of sorry for my French here, but pieces of shit. But they're just they were fleeing themselves from
Yeah.
the Valyrians, so it makes sense.
Yeah. And there is a third invasion of Westeros that happens later, and that is the Rhoynar. And I do want to get to those this season, but it's going to be a minute. So yeah, just know that like there's a third wave of people that come over to Westeros soon, and we'll get there.
People just don't like Essos. They keep leaving.
Yeah, Essos is crazy, man. It
Sounds a little cray.
it's so big and so wild. I think
It's hard to
yeah.
have any kind of peace over there because there's too much going on.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But that was riveting, and I really like that.
Yeah.
So good to know. We know our histories.
GTK.
All right, well, fellow adventurers, I say that's a wrap for today's journey into the realms of Westeros and Middle-earth. We hope you've enjoyed journeying through the histories, mysteries, and fascinating lore of these worlds.
We will return with insights, laughs, and maybe even some unexpected dragons of wisdom along the way. Next up in our Middle-earth adventure, we will learn more about Feanor and, what is her name? Ungoliant, sorry, and Melkor, and
The betrayal of the Noldor.
And then in Westeros, we are going to head over to the Vale and get acquainted with House Arryn.
So we encourage you guys to join in on our conversations online, share your theories, tell us your grievances, or just chat about how you discovered these epic sagas yourself.
What's your favorite character arc in Game of Thrones, or your favorite battle scene in The Lord of the Rings? We want to hear from you.
So thank you for tuning in, and remember, the best adventures are the ones we take together. We swear it by the old gods and the new. Peace!